We are happy to announce that this episode of the SWW show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/?partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/?partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights, maybe it's Mike camera, maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to these interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me a special guest from definitely decently around the world based on our time zones. To get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the game we're here to talk about?
Sure. So my name's Jonah. I work as Fourfold Games. I'm the founder and solo developer behind Fourfold Games, and I'm a massive turn-based game fan. So that's the kind of game that I make. And my current game, Relic Space, which is coming out very soon, is a turn-based game. It's a turn-based space RPG is one way I like to describe it. So it's about a spaceship where you fly around on a hex grid, engaging in a lot of ship-to-ship combat. There's a lot more to it that we can go into, I guess, during the show. But that's the kind of high-level summary.
Perfect. So I want to talk with, so kind of, you said it was an RPG. The other thing that I want to point out too, at least on your Steam page, you call it a game with 4X elements, kind of. Mm-hmm. So when I think of 4X, obviously I think of games that are less RPG in nature and more like kind of like I sit down for like a set session-y kind of. I'm kind of curious how you kind of balance the two. RPGs are inherently these games that a lot of times are longer or kind of take a while, kind of how you kind of balance that with what people's at least perception of 4X is.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to sort of oversell the 4X element. It's definitely just a game with 4X elements. It's definitely not a 4X game. And, you know, I love 4X games. I'm a big fan of Civilization, Stellaris. It's, you know, that's not the genre of Relic Space. But what I've tried to do with Relic Space is have a game where you're playing a single spaceship. So like an RPG, you know, you've got a single player character that you're moving around. But the idea is you're doing that within a kind of 4X universe. So it's a universe where there are lots of factions doing their own thing, trying to develop as factions, and you're sort of completing missions for your own faction and sometimes for other factions as well. And the idea was to sort of have these missions such that they have an impact on the game world around it. So it's a kind of living, breathing universe is the aim. And so that's where it's kind of got 4X elements, because what you do impacts the factions around you, the world around you, and what you're trying to do is help your own faction ultimately. So this kind of links with the general sort of storyline behind the game. So the idea is it's a post-apocalyptic scenario. There's been a massive catastrophe, and you're trying to rebuild civilization for your faction. So you're helping your faction rebuild space stations, for example, build up their economy, and trying to make sure they don't get sort of defeated by hostile factions in the process.
That's very interesting. I'm kind of curious, so when you say post-apocalyptic, I think one of the things that always comes to my head is like a scarcity, right? A scarcity of resources, or of sometimes a scarcity of society. But like, kind of, how are you kind of thinking about it both being scarcity, but obviously with it being like a sci-fi game, there has to be some level of resources just have to kind of exist too, right? Because like obviously the ships exist, or like some of what people do. I'm kind of curious kind of how you're thinking about that, or maybe you're not thinking about scarcity, you're thinking of like a different theming kind of with that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I mean, you're right. To some extent, you have to uh, choose systems that make for good gameplay. So I guess that there are limits to how realistic you can be. But I think overall the way it's designed is pretty realistic for a post-apocalyptic scenario. So the idea is it's not fully explained at the beginning of the game what kind of apocalypse it was, and that's something you're supposed to discover through the storyline. And so, for whatever reason, for a mysterious reason, some structures have survived the apocalypse, including space stations, things like. So, the sort of backstory there is like that there are sort of these research stations, for example, or stations that have a particular purpose. These smaller structures seem to have survived, but the larger structures like planets and moons have been destroyed. And so that leaves you, with some resources to get started with, and the idea as well is that the reason it's called Relic Space is that that's sort of the name for what's left of the solar system after everything's exploded and basically turned into bits of rubble, asteroids just floating around in space. And so the idea is, you can think of these asteroids as the remnants, the relics of previous structures of planets. And that would explain why they've got useful resources and relics within them that you're trying to get. So you're trying to kind of harvest the resources that are left over from before the catastrophe.
Oh, that makes kind of a lot of sense. I'm curious if you don't mind talking about we've kind of talked about how there's other factions and other kind of entities kind of in the experience. Well, do you mind kind of digging into like who are the other players, right? So obviously like you control a faction. I'm kind of curious their background, and then kind of who else kind of exists in this world that you're fighting against.
Yeah, so in the game is kind of divided into main factions and minor factions. So the main difference being is that the main factions are the kind of ones that you're really competing against. So a bit like in Civilization, where you've got the other main sort of competing rulers, and then you've got maybe smaller things like the city-states or the barbarians and so on. In terms of the main factions, the one so to begin with, there's only one faction that you can join at this stage in the game. I'm hoping longer term I'll be able to add other playable factions. So the one you play is called the Order, and the idea is they are sort of genetically engineered super soldiers. So generally the context here is quite kind of a transhumanist kind of future where there's a sort of merging of man and computing technology. So that applies to these guys. They've kind of got computerized brains, genetically engineered bodies. But at the same time, they're the kind of most sort of faction that you can most easily identify with from today, because what they've tried to do is retain traditional human values alongside that technological development. So it's I think for them as a little bit. I've probably been a bit inspired by the Space Marines in Warhammer 40k. So the word order suggests this kind of monastic order. They're really committed to their values, and that they're recognizably human in terms of their values, unlike some of the other factions. So to go on to those, there's a faction called the Circle, who've just gone a whole lot more in the direction of transhumanism, I guess. So they're basically quite happy to think of themselves as machines or computers, and have quite a lot more sort of alien types of values, particularly focused around knowledge, gaining knowledge and understanding the universe, and kind of that's the only thing that matters to them. Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna because interestingly, right? Because obviously when people think of sci-fi, I think there is a general tendency to head towards that direction, as you talk about, of thinking of stuff like the singularity or the transhumanist, or kind of. I'm kind of curious, kind of going into this, because that's always I'm curious about sci-fi writers, if people think of sci-fi that way. Did you kind of have, like, obviously singularity has been like theory that's been around for like 30 or 40 years. is that something that you were familiar with kind of going into this? Did you ever think about, is this kind of like, hey, I have to do research on thinking about sci-fi experience and this kind of stuff popped up?
Um, yeah, no, I guess it's something I'm independently interested in. Yeah, the idea of the singularity and transhumanism. So yeah, I guess generally with I like to do projects that bring together lots of different elements of things that I'm interested in. So yeah, I'm totally into sci-fi, but also like yeah, just thinking about the future generally. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to bring that into the game, and yeah, I guess to some extent like teach people about the concepts and get people thinking about them through this kind of science fiction setting.
That's very neat. I was just kind of curious, yeah, because obviously, kind of with this, like, there's a lot of thoughts to be thinking of, like, hey, when I build a faction, like, there's a moral entity to these factions too, right? Because we think of like moral compasses in the way we're taught them, but like to them, like, if the most moral thing is to be the most machine, then anyone who isn't is inherently breaking their norms, their morals, and that kind of always has to be harder to kind of think about and how to change and explain kind of to players.
Yeah, yeah. So you're talking about what I said about the circle faction, the
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, that's I think a very intriguing way to think about it. Let's kind of jump into kind of how the game kind of functions, right? So obviously said it's 4X expired kind of in you said lightly in the exploration and kind of how the other factions kind of exist in the background kind of during when I'm playing the game though, kind of what should I expect? Kind of like I'm kind of flying through the world in a battle will start kind of am I choosing the battles? If we don't mind kind of talking about that a bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, um, I guess that I try to come up with like a variety of ways in which you might end up fighting people, so that it doesn't get boring. So there's to try and create this kind of sense of a living world. That there are lots of other ships just flying around, sort of irrespective of what you're doing, so that you can bump into, so including hostile enemy ships, as well as friendly ships of your own faction or other friendly factions. So you'll just bump into other ships just by exploring is one thing. Then sometimes you'll also be ambushed. So I built a sort of special game mechanic of being ambushed, which kind of generates these more intense encounters. They're a little bit more challenging, which is sort of the purpose behind those in terms of game design. Yeah, so those are a bit more like self-contained battles then. But then, yeah, the other thing is by taking on missions from NPCs, then that will lead you into specific encounters with hostile enemies as well. So you might get a mission that is actually to assault a particular station or scare away some ships that have been attacking a particular area, for example.
I think it's interesting. Kind of, how did you guys, when you're thinking of the design of this, kind of come up with the mission types or missions you want to play? So was it just like, hey, we want ways to people into battles? Kind of, were you thinking of missions like in the sense of like I think of kind of a game that I think kind of similarly kind of revamped of like XCOM to XCOM 2. I think I was pointing to of like, hey, it went from like just doing this one type of like go kill mission to like here's some variety of this typeage, and they always talk about because they wanted players to still reach this end goal, but they needed more kind of to do to get there. Kind of, is that kind of how you guys thought of it, or was it like, hey, we have these story beats and we need to make missions kind of around it?
Um, yeah, I guess more the first, but I guess I'm going to have the second as well. So I guess maybe to explain first of all, so the early access version that's releasing very soon is built around more procedurally generated missions, which I personally think is great and interesting, just sort of in itself to have procedurally generated missions. You get that kind of variety from that. But during the early access period, and so when I get to the full release of the game, I'm planning to have more handcrafted or sort of scripted missions. So that would be kind of the second approach that you mentioned of really sort of thinking about storyline and interesting narrative and scenarios, and designing the missions around that. Whereas, yeah, with the procedural missions that are currently there, my focus, as you suggested, I think, has really been more about getting as much variety as possible. So I think I've almost like started by just thinking about what are the building blocks of these missions, and then just thinking what are the different ways that those building blocks can be combined. So that way, I'm sort of covering all the possible combinations and permutations to get the maximum variety there. So thinking like, what can be the end goal? The end goal can be destroying an enemy ship. It can also be going to a particular location. It can be picking up a piece of a resource or delivering a resource. And then every mission can have sort of multiple stages to it. So you can combine these stages in different ways. So yeah, that's been quite an interesting process for me to think about just how you can maximize the variety that comes out of these procedural missions, and also at the same time, add a narrative to them as well. Once you've got that basic structure, thinking about what could be the storyline behind this, and that's what the game generates.
Yeah, because procedural is always this super hard thing to kind of pragmatically think about and like make it make sense, right? So like when I think of procedural stuff, whenever I've messed with it, there's always like, hey, you have kind of these like few big building blocks, and you tell the system, hey, I need so many of these, and then each of those big ones have like some sub variety to them or sub stuff they could have on them or in them or whatever. I'm kind of curious, kind of when you guys were designing the system or testing or playing with it, kind of, I'm assuming that it's gone through massive revamps over development, just because kind of controlling the variables and controlling the amount of options that are truly there has probably been a chaotic nightmare, I would assume.
So do you mean about like the concern being you might end up with combinations of things that don't really make sense? And
right,
so
like they both make mechanically sense, story sense, and even like design, and like going through this world of like, oh yeah, no, like it can go from this piece of it to this piece, like that. There's actually a logic behind it versus it just seems like someone put it in a random generator and hit go.
Yeah, I mean there definitely is that, and yeah, like recently I had to like weed out. I realized that actually it didn't really make sense if this kind of biological life form, this alien life form, should not really be building defense platforms in space. That's not really what they'd be doing. So yeah, let me just remove that particular mission where that's the faction that whose defense platform you have to destroy. So yeah, I kind of need to do like a few manual tweaks to the system like that. But generally, I'd say actually I've been able to sort of come up with some kind of story that explains most of the combinations of elements that results from the sort of generation system. So it's kind of like I start with the building blocks, and then I think, okay, what kind of story would make that make sense? And I've usually managed to come up with something.
That's kind of very interesting, and I just think procedural generation are one of those things that like it's always fun because people are like, just make it procedural, and everyone who's dealt it is like, it's somehow harder than just making the content and doing it. But as we're talking, obviously, as we kind of said before, you're going to launch in early access soon. I'm kind of curious to begin with, is there any kind of set timeline, or is it just kind of still that nebulous Q1 at some point this year will come out?
I think we can say it's very likely to be next week. So very, very soon indeed. We'll be announcing hopefully the actual release date in the next couple of days if all goes well.
That is very kind of soon. I got to immediately ask that how stressed has this last few weeks been? I'm assuming you're stressed out of your mind.
I try not to be to ever get too stressed about things like this, because I try and be make sure I'm always on top of everything, and stress can lead to mistakes, and I don't want to do that. I think I've kind of I guess part of this is part of the reason I've managed to not be too stressed is because this release is already massively delayed from my original plans for the release. So it's not like, I'm finally getting to the deadline and getting it, rushing to get it all in. It's no, actually, I was originally planning to release last year, over a year ago, and I've sort of pushed it back whenever I felt it wasn't ready. I really wanted to add more polish and add a few more features just to give people a better experience when they did play it properly for the first time. And so now I've kind of got to the point where, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable that I've added what needs to be added at this point. So in that sense, it's not too stressful. And basically, I've spent the last 2 or 3 months pretty exclusively just like fixing bugs and just testing again and again and making sure it's okay. So yeah, I'm not too stressed that, oh my god, there's going to be something that comes up that I have to quickly fix. Yeah, I think I've just about planned it so that there has been enough time to get everything done.
Oh, that's very, very exciting, kind of. So, as we said, then it'll come out when this probably right around the time this podcast comes out. Go check out Relic Space on Steam. Others, if this comes a few months early, go wishlist it. Go check it out. I gotta ask though, kind of. So obviously you're launching kind of in this early access state. You obviously there's a lot of feedback and probably bug testing that's going to be happening initially. Kind of, what can a player kind of expect from a content release kind of on launch versus whatever it is from now to that quote unquote full release of the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, like I said, a really fundamental difference between the early access and the full launch is going to be the actual main storyline, and the sort of scripted missions that tell that story. And so, but apart from that, the game, I'd say, is actually in a pretty good state, pretty complete. So there's a whole lot of pilot skills you can learn. There's a huge amount of different equipment that you can equip on your ship. There's a lot of different ship types that you can encounter and buy in different stations. There's quite a variety of, like we're saying, in terms of the different mission types, the procedural mission types. So I think it's definitely like it's a fully playable game at this stage. It's just maybe not the kind of game that some people might want. If they're more after that kind of narrative role playing experience and that they really want the storyline, that those people might be better off waiting until the full release. But people who actually enjoy the kind of it's really more of a roguelike game is how I think about it. So where you kind of expect a lot of procedural generation, and that's actually part of the fun of it, that you're because it's procedurally generated, you're getting something different each time you start the game, and it's going to be a different sequence of missions. Even if, from a story point of view, that there's not going to be that much kind of scripted elements there. But yeah, if you're happy with that kind of more roguelike game, then I'd say it's actually a pretty complete game already.
Well, I want to say thank you again for talking to me this afternoon for you. Again, the game is Relic Space. You can go find it currently on Steam to at least wishlist. You may at the time buy it. You can go to on Twitter. You're at Fourfold Games. Is there any spot we should be sending people to go check out?
Cool. Yeah. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you again, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thanks. All right.
The SWW show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcast by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW show on social media at the SWW show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.